Hey guys, this is Khavrion, here with another battle report. This is going to be for an episode of Tabletop Throwdown on March 26, 2023. This is something that they stream, so if you want to go watch the battle report there, you can see, I think, Pseudonym and Lobo talking about the game as we're playing it. The format of Tabletop Throwdown is as follows. First, you sign up because you want to be internet famous or something. Then you are given 2 potential missions, and that's it. You don't know what list your opponent is playing, you don't know what map you're going to be on. And you have to craft a list that can handle both of these missions. The idea here is that if you're in a standard in-person fixed list event, you would have 2 lists and you'd have to cover like 3, maybe even 5 missions. You also wouldn't know who you're playing and you wouldn't know what the maps look like till you got there. Tabletop Throwdown captures that by forcing you to make one list to play 2 potential missions, but you don't know which one you're actually going to play till you show up. And this week, the 2 missions are Quadrant Control and Rescue. As we saw in the title, the mission ends up actually being Rescue, but I don't know that at the time. Still, Rescue is by far the mission that I'm skewing towards, so it's not too big of a deal that, we end up playing Rescue. Going into this thing, I have a whole bunch of thoughts. The first thought is that I really want to try out Dre's take on vanilla Aleph. He calls it the mid-ranger strategy, and the idea is that you have a whole bunch of units who can do a little bit of everything. Close combat, shooting, smoke. They're all totally self-sufficient and fairly tough, and you can use these in order to have presence all over the board. A whole bunch of the guys that do this are in Steel Phalanx, but these guys are not in Lynx because they're in vanilla, and so they end up getting played totally differently from the way you'd normally play things in Steel Phalanx. That appeals to me greatly. I love the fact that sectorials versus vanilla allow you to use the same pool of models, but in a totally different way. For example, if Hippolyta is in Steel Phalanx, she's probably going to be in a Link, and she's probably going to be throwing smoke on Burst 2, and then having Burst 4 and no Impetuous when she's shooting things. However, because she's in a Link, she can't really be used too disposably because you don't want to lose the entire Link. Now, I have some thoughts about maybe slingshotting her forward while the Link runs back or something like that, but for now, let's just focus on the fact that Hippolyta in a Link is very different from Hippolyta not in a Link. And I'm excited to give those sorts of things a try. With that in mind, I actually get a list from Dre that he's using and want to change it up so that I can do the missions. Of those 2 missions, Rescue is by far the one that is dominating my attention the most. I'll actually talk about my thoughts on Quadrant Control first. Quadrant Control is basically a end of round and end of game scoring with a whole bunch of focus on having points in zones. Consequently, for Quadrant Control, I'm going to want models like Dart, or the Proxy Hacker, or the Beast Hunter Forward Deployment, who can just start in the zones. I'm also going to want to have a lot of really tough models so that they don't die, which is going to make it easier for them to exist in the zones. That should be pretty easy to accomplish while also skewing towards Rescue, so I am going to focus mostly on skewing towards Rescue, but there is some thought of Quadrant Control. So that's Quadrant Control, let's talk Rescue. Rescue is a very well-known ITS mission, but honestly, not always in a good way. Like when I mentioned to my buddy Gyro that Rescue was one of the missions on the table, his reaction was something like, oh god, or geez, or boohoo, or something like that. And the reason for that is that Rescue is pretty hard to do, and also favors going second pretty heavily. There's also a bunch of really weird restrictions that make some factions just way better at it than others, and so it's not a particularly balanced mission, and the playstyle that it rewards is not particularly interesting. That said, while all those conditions make it so it's not super suitable as a tournament mission, especially for like the later rounds in an event where you're having really good players who are playing against each other, where the mission is really going to play a big impact, it's also fun to have a mission that is different from everything else. And in the context of Tabletop Throwdown, where we're trying to have fun and where we get to pick our faction and craft our lists knowing that this is coming in, I don't mind playing Rescue at all. Still, it is going to require some skewing, and that skewing is going to be somewhat awkward for my faction. Let's talk about why. So what's going on in Rescue is that there are 4 HVTs per player set up on the opponent's half of the board. These are the black dots and the red dots, as you can see here. The entire focus of the mission is getting over to the HVTs, civivacking them, and then getting them back to your side. Either in the dead zone, that's the sort of beige stretch between the red exclusion zone and the deployment zones, or you want to get them actually into your deployment zone. However, on top of this, there's a whole bunch of twists that make it really complicated. First of all, a model actually has to go out to civ-evac these things, which means getting across the board and then passing a whip +3 roll to grab them. Then that model has to make it all the way back into either your dead zone or your deployment zone. And there's a restriction on how many civilians each model can rescue. Specialists can rescue 2 models, and non-specialists can rescue only 1. So in a game of rescue, you should expect to spend a whole lot of orders walking across the board, grabbing people, and then walking back. However, it's not actually enough just to get the models back. You also have to make sure that the rescue state isn't canceled, such as by having the trooper who did the rescuing get shot and killed. So you've got a situation in which it takes an awful lot of orders to do something, and it takes a relatively small number of orders in order to undo what your opponent has accomplished. Lastly, because scoring happens at the end of the game, it means that the player going second has a fairly robust strategy in which they simply wait out their opponent, and then they kill whichever of their opponent's models has managed to civ-evac something, and then grab one person at the last second. I was in a tournament recently in which rescue was featured as round 4, and our game was basically both of us doing nothing for the mission the whole game until the last second when my opponent grabbed something, ran it back to his deployment, and then I killed it and scored 1 point off my classified. 1-0. This was round 4, and it was because actually doing the mission was just too much of a pain, and it was too easy to cancel any progress on the mission that happens during the middle of the game. And the presence of this non-interactive sort of unfun strategy is, I think, why a lot of people aren't a big fan of rescue. On top of this, though, because the mission involves civ-evacing civilians, you also have to follow all the rules for civ-evacing. And there are a lot of restrictions on who can actually do the civ-evac. I mean, for starters, it's a little bit more open than pushing a button because anyone can do it, not just a specialist. But if you look at the restrictions down here, there are a whole bunch of things that cannot civ-evac things. You can't be impetuous. You can't have the frenzy skill that gives you impetuous. You can't have a peripheral. You can't be a remote. And you can't be part of a fire team. Incidentally, as I'm looking at this, I realized that I actually forgot the restriction of the peripheral. McKeon's going to sync something and he has a peripheral, so whoops. But right out of the gate, there's an awful lot of things that just cannot participate in this mission. If you're playing a sectorial and you want to use fire teams, you cannot have models in those fire teams as they're running the civ-evac guys back. You can civ-evac them and then leave the fire team, but if you want to stay in the fire team, tough. Likewise, you can't be impetuous. That's not a huge deal, but it is going to affect me specifically because of the archetype I'm playing. You can't be a remote, so sensor bots just can't do it, right? If you're going to try to run a Dakini link because you're OSS, tough. And then there is a limit on how much you can civ-evac. The skill says here 2, but in actual rescue it says, well, hold on, only specialists can do 2 civilians, non-specialists can only do 1 civilian. So if you want to have a shot at rescuing a whole bunch of civilians, you're going to need to bring a whole bunch of models who are from a relatively restricted pool, and you're going to have to run them all the way across the board, pass a whip +3 roll, and then run all the way back. And of course, then you're going to have to make sure they don't die, because if they die, they no longer count as civ-evacing. It's a lot. And it's going to have a pretty big impact on the way that I have to craft my lists. Speaking of, let's start by looking at Dre's mid-ranger list, which is going to be my starting point for the list that I'm going to run. This is based on the list that he has been running in IGL. It's not exactly the same, but it has a lot of the same philosophy. And as I mentioned, what's going on here is that you have a whole bunch of dudes who are able to do a little bit of everything. They can shoot, they can fight, they can throw smoke, they can push buttons, they can just generally be survivable. Because they're all unlinked and many of them are impetuous, you don't really want to take a fair fight with any of them, but because of how much Eclipse you have, you often don't need to take a fair fight. So let me take you through it. I'm going to start by talking about Oiteros, because by talking about Oiteros, I can talk about the philosophy of the mid-rangers. A MIM-6, 6'2", NCO specialist with Eclipse grenades, 2 structure, and a Mark 12 who can CC is a guy that can do basically everything in the game by himself. If he needs to shoot something, he can. The Mark 12 has perfectly serviceable range bands, and MIM-6 is great. If he doesn't want to shoot it, he can throw Eclipse. If he needs to push a button, he can do that. If he needs to fight something in CC, he can do that as well. CC is probably his most reliable way of deleting something tough like a tag. And at 42 points, he's not so expensive that you need to warp everything around him specifically. In other words, he can be disposable. So if your mission requires models who can do stuff in the midfield for whatever reason, Oideros is going to be really excellent at doing that and really hard to stop from doing that. I mean, because he's impetuous, he can't actually rescue anyone, so maybe that's a bad example for this specific mission, but in general, Oideros is really good as an example of what can be a mid-ranger in this philosophy. And a lot of the other stuff is similarly mid-ranger material. You've got Penthesilea, who is crazy fast. She's not particularly good at anything. Like, she throws smoke on 14s, which is not great. She's only got an SMG with min -3, which is not great. Her monofilament CCW is able to delete tags pretty well, but it can fail against like a 1 wound dude, so that's not great. But she can do everything, and that's really, really cool. She's also just blazingly fast, which again is really cool. Hippolyta is a non-specialist version of Oideros who has better fizz for throwing smoke, has an explosive close combat weapon, and has berserk and super jump, so she's like more mobile and spikier than Oideros. And then you've got Machaon. Machaon is, again, a really solid lieutenant choice. He can throw Eclipse, he can fight in close combat, he's a doctor in case someone needs healing, he can also doctor himself because he has NWI. If you need Eclipse thrown, he's got that. The only downside in the context of rescue is he has a frenzy, so if he wounds someone, then he's going to have to stop being able to holding on to the civilian. Still, it's a really solid piece. It's a shame he doesn't have a Udbot, but where are you going to spend the points? Those are, I think, the mid-rangers. The vast majority of the remainder of the list is cheap stuff to support those mid-rangers. You've got 2 proxies. These are the cheapest proxies available. They're both really, really solid. The Mark I Hacker is a little bit of an unusual choice, but it's cheaper than the Mark II, and if you're relying on repeaters, it's just as good at doing that hacking job. You've got a Daleth sensor bot. These have tactical awareness and marksmanship and stuff in this season, so no problems there. Missile launcher bot, fine, right? You've got the hacker. 3 net rods for cheap cheerleading orders. They're kind of expensive these days, but what are you going to do? A beast hunter. This is forward deployment and really good in close combat with a heavy flamethrower. He should be able to trade up. That's the idea. 2 flashball spots because they're great, and a Liberto because they're great. The only other piece that I haven't talked about is Armand. He is the long-range gun, especially the long-range ARO gun of this list. I do think this list needs something like Armand in order to handle long-range gunfights, or maybe it needs Nauf, or maybe it needs the Mark II sniper guy, or maybe it needs just Phoenix standing there. I don't know. But it needs something that can be on ARO, something that can shoot flash pulse bots in case they're themselves on ARO, and something which is like not so fragile that it's just going to die if something sneezes on it. And for all those reasons, I think Armand is what has been chosen here. But I've seen versions of this list that have Nauf. I think Dre was not liking Nauf recently because he's very fragile and can't quite handle tags. I've seen versions of this with the Mark II sniper. I'm generally interested in that, but I couldn't figure out the points. And then you could potentially take Atalanta. The total reaction version of Atalanta is one example. I will be going with the hidden deployment version of Atalanta. But some sort of long-range gunfighter that can handle flashball spots and that can, be on ARO so you're not just completely hiding. The problem with all of your guys having impetuous, of course, and wanting to throw smoke, is that they basically don't want to stand up and get shot. The fact that these guys don't want to stand up and be shot is also the biggest difference between the vanilla Aleph approach to these Greek heroes and the Steel Phalanx approach to these Greek heroes. In Steel Phalanx, Oideros just stands there and throws Eclipse like a champion. In this philosophy, he can't do that, or rather, he's advised not to do that. So this is Dre's mid-ranger list. I'm going to be trying to take something similar for rescue, but I'm going to have to make a bunch of changes. For starters, the Daleth is right out. Remotes can't do anything. Oideros is also probably going to be right out. His whole thing is that he's a specialist who can do a whole bunch of stuff, and he's impetuous, so he can't do anything. Penthesilea is still really, really awesome. She's going to be an all-star here. She is so blazingly fast that running across the board, sinking 2 civilians under the cover of her own smoke or someone else's smoke should be no problem for her. Hippolyta isn't great for this mission, but I've been wanting to try her out, and the fact that Oideros is just not useful sort of means that I can choose Hippolyta over Oideros here and not feel that bad. Machaon's still going to be my lieutenant, but these are the things that are going to start needing to be changed. Here then is what I settled on. I went with the Proxy Mark II hacker instead of the Mark I. This is because I might be playing quadrant control and having the points in the zone is nice. I put Machaon as my lieutenant in Group 2 so that he can use Eclipse to cover other people's advance, and I put the Beast Hunter in Group 1 so that he can, maybe do some damage. I also took Dart, and so having the Beast Hunter and Dart both be mimetic camo markers in the midfield means that my opponent won't know which is which. Incidentally, I took Dart because she is plausibly able to run up and sink a civilian while also fighting something. She is also sort of a mid-ranger in a lot of ways because she can take care of herself, she's fairly tough, she can shoot, and she's fairly mobile with climbing plus. If we're in quadrant control, I'm going to be especially happy to have Dart climbing on the buildings and shooting my opponent's camo markers that have forward deployed in order to, be the quadrant control thing. Next we have Hippolyta. We've talked about her. She's probably not a great pick for rescue, but in quadrant control, her mobility might be nice to get on buildings, and, I just want to try out Hippolyta. Penthesilea, she's awesome. Samek is still here because I got the hacker, why not? Probot for the orders, Netrod, Netrod, Netrod for the orders. In Group 2, I have the Liberto, nothing surprising there. 2 Flash Pulses, nothing surprising there. Machaon, again, we've talked about him already. And instead of taking Armand, I've gone with Atalanta. A big reason for this is experience. I have run Hidden Deployment Atalanta in Group 2 an awful lot in Steel Phalanx, and so I'm fairly confident that I know how to use her in vanilla. Secondarily, I don't know how to use Armand. He's kind of a weird piece. With Mim -6, that's nice, and MSV1, that's also nice, but he's only burst 2, and once he takes a wound, he loses everything that makes him special. So he's present in order to be an ARO piece, but like all ARO pieces in infiNity, you can't just put him up to see the world and expect that to work. You have to choose your targets and your ARO lanes very carefully. I don't have the experience with Armand to do that reliably. So because I'm stepping out of my comfort zone of Steel Phalanx and into this mid-ranger thing, I'd rather use Atalanta, who I know and who I'm confident is going to play the same, than Armand, who's going to be different and I might misuse him. Still, I own a Armand model, and if I do run this in person, maybe I'll try Armand instead. So this is my take on Dre's mid-ranger list for the specific missions of Quadrant Control and Rescue. Here then is my opponent's list. He is playing Ramah Task Force, and he has taken a double tag, double Rafik list. He's got a Magariba Guard, a Shakush, and 2 Rafiks with the Red Furies. The idea is that the Rafiks can duo with the tags, and they also get tactical awareness. So this list is going to bring with it a whole bunch of tactical awareness orders. That is unfortunately just about all that it will have. You're going to have a Doctor, Lieutenant, and Layla as a 3-person core. You're going to have a Najrun and Nazmat as your engineer. You're going to have a Sunbokbot as an aero piece. I think this is kind of expensive, and this list would be well served to not have a really expensive piece, but he's trying to keep it limited insertion, and I can respect that. All that's left is the Corsair Bashi Bazook, which you get for free from this mission, and a War Core. So this is very much a skew list. And unfortunately, it is going to have a real problem doing rescue. I think my opponent hoped that we would do quadrant control because the Magariba and the Shakush would both be able to move just a butt ton of points into quadrants with these guys. Remember, the Magariba Guard has baggage. But for rescue, he's got a problem. The Rafiks can't sync because they're remotes, which means he's got to use the Magariba Guard or the Shakush. Unfortunately, both of these things are tags, and I am going to be able to put repeaters or hackers near my own HVTs, which means I can threaten total control of the tags as they try to sync things. So right off the bat, he's going to have a real hard time doing the mission with this list. Still, even if we'd done quadrant control, I think this list would have trouble attacking me. Again, I'm just going to be able to hide behind my repeaters and my hackers and basically force his remotes and his tags to stay away or risk existential failure of the attack run. If a Magariba Guard gets possessed, that's it. Attack run over, and I'm even going to have control of his tag until he can cancel it with a command token at the start of his next turn. All of which is to say my opponent has run a skew list, and I'm not sure the skew is going to be particularly good for him in this matchup. With that in mind, let's see how it plays out. I win the lieutenant role and decide to choose deployment. Here then is how I deploy. I have a Netrod, Netrod, and Netrod to pass the drops. This one failed. I have a proxy forward observer. He's here in order to watch this guy. They were my withheld piece. This is the proxy hacker. This is Dart. The idea here is that she's fairly forward deployed and can use her camo and climbing plus to approach if she needs to. Hippolyta's here. She is defending Machaon, but otherwise is trying to make sure she has a safe impetuous run. Penthesilea is here. She's trying to, again, sort of stay safe, but she can see a little bit. I'm relying on her smoke and her armor and all that to keep her safe. She also has 2 wounds, so, like, she's probably not going to die, and I don't want to have nothing on arrow. Liberto, mine. Beast Hunter. Remember, my opponent doesn't know if this is a Beast Hunter or Dart, so that's kind of nice. Flashball spot on arrow. Probot just being a repeater. This repeater is going to be a real problem. Netrod, Sonic Missile Launcher, Udbot attached to Machaon, and then my HVT is going to be right here. Oh, sorry, not HVT. Atalanta is going to be right here in hidden deployment. During deployment, I realized that I had forgotten to take a Bashi Bazooka, and so I just decided to use it as a combat drop version. Probably would not have done that in an actual game, but, you know, what are you going to do? Here then is my opponent's deployment. This asset didn't load, but it's just a floor tile, so don't worry about it. He has a Shakush and a Rafik. The Shakush was one of his 2 withheld pieces. Then he's got a Magariba and a Rafik. The Magariba was his other withhold piece. He has, I think, Layla, Gulam Doctor, and Gulam Lieutenant. Or no, this is Layla over here, but that's the 3 of them. They're going to stay here. They're going to do nothing. He has a Warcore, and then he has a Sundokwat Decoy here and Sundokwat Actual there. Oh, and he has a Nazmat, and then the Najarun is, I think, in this corner. So he has a tag that can progress up this side. He has a tag that can progress up this side. And, I mean, like, it's a 2-tag list. That's pretty much all he has. I am fortunate enough to get to go second on a mission that favors going second, and my opponent has to go first. Let's use this picture, and then I can tell you how it goes. Basically, the Magariba is going to try to run up in this direction, take out this Lambent Flashball spot, and then basically stall out because of this repeater. He's going to try to use mines in order to threaten my camo markers, like he puts a mine down here and a mine down here. But we realize that you can't actually deploy a mine with a mine dispenser that would see a camo marker unless there is a legitimate target. So this mine is not actually able to see the Liberto, which is why it's allowed to go there. And this mine goes down because it can see the Lamed, but it's not able to, like, go here, for example, and threaten both the Beast Hunter and the Liberto. So my opponent is going to get up close, he's going to put the mine down, and then the Magariba guard is going to basically run around the corner in order to see the Beast Hunter. He does censor both the mine and the Beast Hunter, so the Beast Hunter is revealed. There's also a mine present, and so they're going to fight. What happens is the Beast Hunter manages to pass his dodge, he dodges out to here, and during this attempted fight, the Magariba is going to get too close to this repeater, and it's going to have to reset or risk total control. I mean, it's still risking total control and actually win the face-to-face, which is very bad for him, but the Magariba does tank the save and is able to guts back. The problem here is that now he has his Rafik in this position, his Magariba guard in this position, and my Beast Hunter is right there. He's got to get them out of there, but as he does it, I'm going to dump a flamethrower on him, he'll dump 2 flamethrowers on me, and I end up knocking out the Rafik, wounding the Magariba guard, and my Beast Hunter dies. Soaked up a bunch of orders, didn't die to the mine, not bad. Incidentally, I think Dart over there would have been even more dangerous because she has EM grenades. So I could have, like, pegged the Magariba guard with EM grenades and risked completely turning it and the Rafik off. That would have been pretty cool. I mean, she would have died by fire, but it still would have been pretty cool. After all said and done, the situation looks something like this. The smoke is from my turn. I didn't take a picture at the end of his turn, but basically what happens is you have the Shakush who moved up to here. The Rafik is around the corner there. The Magariba guard is right there and wounded. The Rafik is right there and unconscious. And when he moved the Shakush up through this doorway, I chose to reveal Atalanta and take a snipe. I didn't realize that it would trigger the mine that was right here when I revealed her, but by the time that has happened, we'd rolled a bunch of dice, so there was nothing fair except to say Atalanta has to take the mine, and she's lucky enough that she tanks the save. It's not a super big deal. I do have the Udbot right here, so I could have doctored her up, but it's nice that she's not unconscious. Okay, my turn. What do I want to do? Well, there's a Shakush here, there's a Rafik there, and there's a Magariba guard over here. I would like to do a little bit of damage, but also make sure that I stay safe. So I'd also like to try to use Hippolyta because she seems really cool, and that's my goal. How do I accomplish this? Well, for starters, I'm going to use Machaon in Group 2, who is both the lieutenant and has Group 2 orders, to throw a bunch of smoke in order to cover the advance. If we look at this picture, like most of this smoke is going to come from Machaon. This was Hippolyta's impetuous smoke, but this one and this one come from Machaon. And he actually failed to throw smoke, I think, I don't know, like right here. So I've been very happy that he was able to get smoked down, but I'm also very happy that I got to use my group 2 orders in order to cover this advance rather than having to use group 1 orders. Into that smoke, we have Hippolyta. She basically just ran like this to there, then like this to there. I forget, maybe she had to throw smoke herself. I'm not sure why the Gecko was able to dodge away from cover. Maybe she got a dodge off because of Machaon. I'm not sure. But anyway, Hippolyta is able to get over there in the smoke and kill this guy in CC. After that, she's going to run up to this corner and gunfight the Rafik. The Rafik's in cover, and it has BTS-3, and she has a Breaker Combi. So hilariously, the Breaker Combi is going to be a disadvantage to her, but she's got the burst advantage, and she's got, plenty of orders with which to do this, so I'm able to fight the Rafik and put it straight to dead. I don't want to actually run around the corner because there is a Sunduk bot over there, and I don't want Hippolyta to get hit by Viral, so I'm just sitting on this corner fighting the Rafik. Takes 1 order to take it out, 3 more orders to actually put it straight to dead or something like that, after which she runs back here, coup de grace the Sakush, and then retreats to, I think she runs over onto this side. My last order in group 2 is spent getting Machaon to safety up here, and that's that. Yeah, here's the situation. Note, no Shakush, no Rafik. Hippolyta ends up over here. Does she take a wound? I can't remember if she takes a wound, but she is over here. Now, if we look at it from this perspective, we can see she has not taken a wound. This is the start of my opponent's second turn. And in a lot of ways, the game is pretty much over. My opponent has realized that he has nothing which can threaten my HVTs. He has nothing which can threaten my army. And so he's just got to take some long bomb, lucky plays, and hope they work out. What he's going to do is he's going to bring his Bashi Bazook onto this corner, and he's going to try to have the Bashi Bazook fight Hippolyta or something and hope that it wins. This is not a bad strategy considering the situation he's in, but it's also not likely to work, and it doesn't. The Flash Pulse and Penthesilea both have arrows, which cleans up his decoys, and Hippolyta actually makes her dodge on 11, which is fairly lucky. So she dodges around to, I think, this position. The Bashi Bazook runs up to fight. Hippolyta puts a Nanopulsar on him. He puts 2 shotguns on her. They both fail 1 save. He is unconscious. She's wounded, and that's that. My opponent then spends some orders putting a mine down speculatively with the Magariba Guard, just so that if Atalanta stands up, that's a problem. And then it's going to walk over to, I think, here in order to be on arrow duty down this lane. Here is the position at the start of my turn 2, and I'm thinking I could either try to kill the Magariba Guard, or I'm going to try to grab civilians and get Penthesilea back. I think I'm going for this secondary strategy of grabbing civilians because I don't want to run out of orders, and I just don't know how good Penthesilea will be able to be at doing that. I have a little bit of a problem, which is that the HVTs are here, and there's a Sunduk bot right here who's got arrow duty on that. But I'm hoping that I can use Hippolyta and throw some smoke and make that happen. And indeed, that is exactly what happens. Hippolyta runs up to here, throws 1 smoke to protect this civilian, throws another smoke in order to protect the second civilian, and thankfully it only takes 1 impetuous plus 2 regular orders to do that. Here is the smoke. 1 is right there, 1 is right there. With that smoke down, Penthesilea is able to run like crazy up the board in order to try to get the civilians. Actually, not quite yet. The Magariba Guard is watching this lane and this lane, but Machaon is able to use group 2 orders in order to cover that smoke as well. He's got plenty of orders to do that. I just need it to happen. So Penthesilea, she runs like this, gets over to there. She's able to touch civilians and then move 8 inches away in order to civivac them, and that's really, really efficient. So I've still got 4 orders left after she's synced both of these guys. Maybe not 4, but I've got plenty of orders left after the syncing has happened. So she is then able to run all the way back to this position. That's a little bit more exposed than I'd like. As you can see, she'll still be visible, but she's got Mimetism, she's got Bioimmunity and BTS-3, she's got 2 wounds, she can throw smoke, and worst case scenario, if she is knocked out, I can just have Machaon go sink these civilians. So I'm fairly confident with her being there. And actually, it looks like I have 1 order left with which to get Hippolyta even to safety. The only other thing that happens is, remember there was a mine up here? Well, I have Machaon run the Udbot up there in order to trip the mine, and the Udbot miraculously survives the mine and so goes prone. This lets me stand up Atalanta, and her job is just to sit there, shoot things, and maybe soak up a few orders. To that end, she is largely successful. Using this picture for my opponent's turn 3, he's going to take his Magariba Guard and fight Atalanta. It goes badly for him at first, but then it goes well. 3-4 orders later, Atalanta's dead. The Magariba has taken another wound, so now it has 2 wounds. The Magariba is then going to stand on this plant and shoot at Penny. My smoke goes down, so that's that. And then the Magariba Guard is going to go and try to fight Hippolyta. This is not a good idea. I mean, my opponent knows this is not a good idea. Hippolyta is like super dangerous to the Magariba Guard, and he actually ends up getting too close in order to threaten her. But at the same time, my opponent knows that his list has really not served him well, so I think he does it for the audience. The Magariba Guard ends up in this position. It then tries to CC Hippolyta, because why not? And Hippolyta wins the face-to-face and deletes it. This is obviously not good for my opponent, and it's not necessarily good plays, but it does highlight one of Atalanta's strengths. Excuse me, one of Hippolyta's strengths, which is that she's really obnoxious to actually put down. Even unlinked, she's crazy in close combat. She's got decent armor and 2 wounds. I mean, she got wounded along the way, but she has another one after that. And she can throw Eclipse, she can dodge like a champion, and she can be a real pest. Also, on maps with more terrain, she can potentially use Super Jump to get somewhere safe. All in all, I think it's plausible that Hippolyta might take a whole bunch of orders in order to actually eliminate. And well, I don't think that the primary strategy for Hippolyta elimination should be to CC it with a heavily wounded tag. The fact is that she has managed to be a real pest, even though she started her turn, just standing right here, wounded, with nothing better to do. Anyway, when my turn starts, the Magariba's unconscious, and I've got really nothing better to do but try to get some more HVTs. I'm going to take Machaon, move him into group 1. He's going to run all the way up here. He's going to sink the civilian, and then he's going to run all the way back. Remember when I told you that I forgot about the peripheral thing? This is where that matters. He couldn't have done this, but it doesn't really matter. I then bring my Bashi Bazooka on the board right here. His Sundopwa sees. He guesses the wrong one first. I put one here, one here, one here, and he guesses the middle one first. That's not the real one. And I manage to run to this position. When I do that, he guesses this one. That's the correct Bashi Bazooka, but I actually managed to crit him and thus win the face-to-face. So having won the face-to-face, my Bashi Bazooka is able to get into silhouette contact with his HVT, and he passes the sync roll there as well. So I've managed to get 2 additional HVTs on my last turn of the game. This ends up being worth 4 points because I dominate the dead zone as well. And yeah, whoopsie, one of those was illegal. However, even if I had done nothing on my 3rd turn, I would still have managed to get 6 points, 5 for the actual mission, and then 1 classified. So the game was pretty much over long ago, but this is how it wraps up. In summary, I am quite pleased with how this turned out. I don't think it is necessarily an exemplary, example of how a game with this mid-rangers might have gone. My opponent took a skew list that was badly suited for the mission and badly suited for the matchup. But even in that context, I was pleased with Machaon's ability to throw smoke in group 2. I was pleased with Hippolyta's ability to just get extra close and dangerous. I was pleased with Hippolyta's ability to be annoying, even in the midfield. And I was pleased with Pennsylvania's ability to just rocket across the board, grab 2 HVTs, and run away. I was pretty sure Penthesilea would have been able to do that, but I was pleased to see it happen. Based on the success that this has had so far, I have really started thinking, what lessons can I take to Steel Phalanx when I have this philosophy? I mean, I can run Penthesilea. I can run Hippolyta. I can run Group 2 Machaon if I feel like it in Steel Phalanx. I don't, but I could. And even in the absence of Steel Phalanx play, I'm also excited to play this here. This is using Greek heroes in a way that's really fun and different, and that's great. And I have to say, Dre, if you're watching this, I am absolutely thrilled that you have found an archetype for Vanilla Aleph that is fun to play and different from Steel Phalanx. I originally found the big boy list because I was signing up for an event. I was gonna play heavily Greek Vanilla Aleph, and I just couldn't make a list that I liked. This was in, May of 2021 or something like that. And so I was just so disappointed with what Vanilla Aleph could play at that time that I decided to take the meme list that would turn out to be big boys. And as we all know, that was a really powerful list. It was a really fun list. And in some senses, the rest is history. But that all happened because of how disappointed I was with what Vanilla Aleph could do at the time. And in the time since then, I kept looking back at Vanilla Aleph thinking, what can vanilla Aleph do? Surely there's something exciting that they can do that leverages the strength of Steel Phalanx with the flexibility of vanilla. And I couldn't find it until here we have exactly that. Leveraging the Steel Phalanx rework and also just leveraging his experience with vanilla Aleph before that. I think Dre has found an archetype that works, that's fun, that's exciting, and that I am looking forward to trying out more of. So, as I said again, Dre, if you're watching this, great job. This is awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys around.